Welcome on inside yet another edition of the Business of Social podcast powered by STN Digital. I'm your host, David Brickley. Each and every program, we dive into the ever-changing digital social marketing landscape. This show is no different. I, of course, bring in producer Will, as I do every intro to these podcasts. And Will, correct me if I'm wrong, have we had a numbered podcast? And I don't really know what the system is anymore, but if we have a one-on-one interview, we call it a number, an episode number. If it's a panel or a mini episode, we don't give it an episode number. So this is episode 57, but we've had like 65 podcasts. You know, you tell me the logic.
Yeah, when this podcast numbering system was created, we weren't planning for mini episodes, panels, things of that nature.
After shows to the social dilemma, all those things.
Technically, this is episode 57. We're probably closer to like 70 and change.
Yeah.
But this is a more traditional one-on-one interview. The back to the roots of the podcast, if you will.
Beautiful. All right, so we have a great episode for you guys and gals today. Rachel Porges joins us. She is a CMO and advisor. She's worked in so many categories, Will, as you know, including CPG, food and personal care, travel, hospitality, retail, and QSR, and has worked for brands like Neutrogena, Unilever, JetSuite, and a current advisor, former CMO as well, of Levain Bakery out of New York. So I'm really excited. I want to talk to her and get her on the show, Will, because after meeting her a couple of weeks ago, just the fact that she's worked in so many different industries, again, from food and beverage to, what is it, airlines. I mean, you can't think of different industries she's worked in, but some of the same marketing strategies go through and through those industries.
Yeah, super smart marketer. I think you could take almost her like playbook or system, really plug it into any brand, and she's going to grow your brand in the 12 to 18 months that she's there, but super knowledgeable about anything from paid to organic to influencers to all that kind of stuff.
All right, so Will, it is episode number 57. Now, I feel like I'm a sports geek, and I know a lot of you, it's been a while since we played this game here on the Business Social. I got nothing at 57. I mean, I'm thinking of linebackers maybe from the 90s or something in the NFL, but I know I can't think of any NBA players, but let's run it down. Episode 57. What 57s do we have?
Not a great list. The only guy I could think of was, I think Clay Matthews is 57. I'll have to do a live fact check of that. But on this list, I see Francisco Rodriguez, K-Rod, MLB closer.
Okay.
Tom Jackson, NFL great, and now NFL studio.
Tom Jackson, Chris Berman's Tom Jackson?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Dwight, either Stevenson or Stephenson. Some old head's going to be mad at me on that one, but him as well.
Dwight Stevenson?
Yeah.
Is that it? That's the list?
That's, according to this article, that's it.
57's a rough number. I can't wait till 50.
Yeah.
58, I think, has a couple that I can think of. All right, 57. I mean, listen, it's a Tom Jackson podcast, and no disrespect to the MLB and maybe my lack of knowledge thereof, but that's the only name I recognize in this. I don't know about you.
It's
all right, at least I feel better. All right, it is episode number 57. We are going to talk to the great Rachel Porges right here on the Business Social. You are going to enjoy it. All right, everybody, I'm excited and pleased to have on the program Rachel Porges, and she is a CMO and advisor. She's done a lot in her career thus far, and I'm excited to dig in. Rachel, how's it going?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
Very, very good. So for the listeners, can you give us some more context, a little bit about what you do and kind of what you do day to day?
Yeah, well, right now I'm working on advising a couple of different brands on strategies and marketing plans and whatnot. But my career has been based on really helping ascertain brand strategy and turning that into actionable tactics. So from the moment I started in PR, I guess many moons ago at Ketchum, when I was just a wee child.
Yep.
And moving forward, it's just been all about trying to tell a story and really trying to figure out exactly what's true to that brand en route to telling that story. And it's what drove me to go back to business school. It's what drove me to continue to move forward in my career. It's what drove me into the startup land because I felt like I could have a bigger stake in that. And it's continued until today.
What are some of the brands? I was kind of taking a browse at your LinkedIn, but throughout your career thus far, and I know you worked a ton in CPG and startups, but can you give us some context on some of the brands you've worked with so far?
Yeah. So I've worked at Neutrogena, where I worked on like acne products. You've never seen a focus group till you've seen a bunch of teenagers talking about pimples. And that was before Instagram. So it tells you it's probably changed dramatically since then. I've worked on PF Chang's frozen food. I launched that 10 years ago, which was really interesting because it was a world of taking a brand equity that I didn't own and transitioning into something that I had to not ruin en route to what we were doing. I've worked on a company called Hello Products. I helped start that company. I was employee number 1 or 2, depending on whether you count the founder. It's an oral care brand, sort of, we call it seriously friendly oral care.
Hey, shouts out to that founder for the first employee being a marketing invite. I like that.
Yeah, well, I wasn't actually doing as much marketing as I have been since then.
Okay.
I was. Can I curse on this podcast?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I was, as I called it at the time, I was Craig's get shit done girl.
Yeah.
I mean, everything from like the packaging to
multiple hats. Yeah.
Trademarks to like literally going down and picking a co-packer. I mean, who does that? My first day on the job, I cleaned a toilet, I bought a computer, and I set pricing strategy.
There you go.
I worked at Kriser's Natural Pet, which is an all-natural pet retailer. It was based in Santa Monica. We took it from, when I got there, it was 22 stores. We went to 43 and packaged it up for a roll-up with private equity. And then I moved to JetSuiteX, which is semi-private aviation. So I don't know if you're keeping tabs, but personal care, food.
Yeah,
travel.
I mean, this is what's great about what we're about to dig into right now. Because, I mean, Neutrogena to pet to bakery to semi-private jets, like you're talking about a broad spectrum of things. But what you and I both know about marketing, what you and I both know about marketing is it really has all the same tendencies and core values, if you will. So let's start there. I mean, I'd like to ask this question a ton on this show, but what is your overall approach to marketing? What is your core belief on how brands should approach it?
My core belief is that marketing is not that hard. And I think it's work I learned at Unilever, and it's just come with me. Marketing is get who to do what and how. And if you know the who and you know what you want them to do because you've set a business objective, and I mean a business objective, not a marketing objective, very different things. The fun is in the how. The fun is in the tactical planning. But if you don't know your audience and you don't know what you're trying to achieve, you can't do it.
Yeah.
And so I subscribe heavily. David Ogilvy always said, give me the freedom of a tight brief, right? And I mean, you know this from the agency side. I'm not an agency person, but I've always felt a responsibility to my agency partners, to my creative partners, even to my teams, to give them the freedom of a tight brief and to really define what we were trying to achieve. And to me, marketing is that. I think I take marketing from a very commercial mindset. We're here to achieve a goal. We're here to sell something or drive awareness of something. But if we're just doing it in a vacuum and we're creating pretty pictures on a page, we failed.
Yeah.
And so that's my world. And I think that if you get those things done, you have a really clear, tight vision of what you're trying to achieve, the rest of it's a blast. But the hard work is finding those things.
One of the things that I always see as well is companies, brands not really understanding the difference between sales and marketing, or there's a sales and marketing department that never talk to each other, which is a huge problem if you're all trying to reach a revenue projection or a success projection type thing. So how do you explain the difference between those two departments and what they should be focusing on?
The joy in CPG is that they harmonize pretty quickly. And so my formative years are in CPG, so I see it differently. Media and entertainment, much harder because
100%.
And brand awareness, really different.
Yep.
I believe marketing is a tool en route to sales, and it is anathema for me to say that as a marketer in a lot of places, right?
Yeah.
But we don't exist if we don't make money. This is, unless you work in nonprofit and then you're still trying to make money for some purpose. But I believe marketing is a valuable tool to sales. In CPG, I saw myself as the keeper of the consumer voice and a resource for my salespeople, almost equally. I loved going and talking to the buyers at Kroger and CPG, and CPG buyers. When at Levain, my last role, I did all the sales process at the beginning by myself. I didn't have a salesperson. So I was creating a brand, going to have to market that brand, but I also was trying to set strategy to figure out how it got on shelf at the grocery store. And to me, those things work completely in harmony. I think sales at the end of the day has to make a number. Oftentimes, sales is not responsible for profitability. That often falls to marketing. particularly in
point.
CPG that matters, right? Because you're
Yeah.
talking about product inputs, and sales guys would be happy to discount the hell out of anything at the grocery store, and
Yep.
marketers not.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, I think that they have to work hand in hand. And I think all too often marketers get a little bit on their high horse about who they are and what they are. And that's great. But we're here to sell something, and we have to acknowledge that that's part of our job.
I also feel like, not to get out too much on a tangent, but if the core values or the values of the company aren't being shared across those two departments, then you may have an amazing voice, an amazing attention to detail with your consumer, and have this type of value system you're trying to push out to your ambassadors and loyal customers, and then your sales team maybe way over the top, like way too aggressive, and then kind of like, you know what I mean? Because a lot of times the salespeople in a lot of organizations are that first touch to those potential prospects. And if those two things aren't aligned, then they get a certain type of first reaction to the brand.
Well, I think oftentimes you see that more often than not, you see that in price, right? Where a salesperson will like chase the win hard, and a marketing person is trying to make this a premium product or premium service, whatever it is. And you see it in price. I think it all comes back to the what in that get who to do what and how. And yes, there's a core value element, but there's also like, what are we trying to achieve, and making sure everybody's aligned there. Yeah. And somebody, whether it's the CEO, the head of marketing, whoever that like chief commercial officer is, needs to be able to define that there's certain parameters around that, like that how that you need to chase. If we're not going to be a discount brand, don't even start waving the discount flag. If we want subs to pay full price for something, don't start running promotions as a kickoff. Like, that doesn't make any sense. All you're going to do is confuse your consumer, let alone your team. So I think it's really understanding your business objectives, and then making sure that that's part of your value system.
Yeah, and I wanted to get into, because it really seems like you thrive and have a passion over working with startups, kind of that initial 12 to 18 month, phase of launching a product or a brand, and then get them off the ground, and then maybe be able to hand the keys off and say, hey, you guys are now in a good spot to continue on. So with that being said, I wanted to, really get into that situation where you may be approached by a brand, or maybe you're someone gives a nice intro. What's the first question that you're asking these early brands, or maybe some of these brands that are starting a new product, and they know they want to increase marketing, but what are some of those initial questions you're asking that brand?
I think it goes back to like, what are we trying to achieve? That's the single question I try to achieve. What's our business goal? Where are we trying to get to? If it's a private equity backed company, what are we trying to exit at? Like, really, what are we trying to chase here? And how are we going to get there? I believe that there's 3 ways to grow a business. There's more users, more usage, or you trade them up. I think there's only 3 ways to grow.
Yeah.
It's not so much a marketing question. It's a business question to me. And I guess it's funny, I've tripped into the fact that this is my happy place, is 12 to 18 months. It's a byproduct of working in I guess, traditional CPG, where you rotate so frequently.
Yeah.
And there's people around. And then that's just been by chance what's happened in my career. But I love that. I love that, like, that setting the 3-year plan and getting the table stakes right, and getting the strategy right, asking these hard questions, I think my greatest achievements are when I've had to ask, like, really had to understand how you're going to get from, I remember when I was at JetSuite, I sat down with the CEO, and he had this great, it's funny because there's a lot of things that for my time there were kind of wonky, but there's this great chart that was the price per ticket that people paid and the number of people on a plane. And we had a target. We knew we had to get this much revenue per flight.
Yeah.
That's, by the way, aviation in general. That's anything with variable pricing strategy. You end up with these sliding scales. But it's the only time in my career that I remember seeing somebody, when I first came in, handed me this thing and said, your job is to move northeast on this.
Yep.
And I mean, it's no different than what you get when you set a CRM strategy and you're trying to move recency and frequency northeast. And it sounds very Harvard Business School like for me to talk that way, because everything's a matrix there. But I think that's exactly what it is. And so I always sit down and try to chase the goal first. And then the next step is, who are the people that are going to get us to those goals?
Yep.
Who are our current customers? Where do we have opportunity areas? Who's adjacent to them? Who looks like them? And there's everything in the world is lookalike audiences right now, right?
Yep.
But that's what it is who's going to get us from A to B? Are there enough of them? Is there enough willingness to pay? What's the context we're operating within? And that's become what I've done, either sort of latently or very directly when I walk into any assignment, whether it's a consulting gig or a job I've had.
Yeah. What's a common, I ask this question a lot too, like the common mistakes that you personally see a lot of brands making when it comes to their marketing?
To me, it's everywhere right now. People jump to growth and analytics before they've set strategy. And it's because they need something to reward agencies on, or they need something to reward people on, or because CEOs are notoriously impatient and understand, CFOs notoriously want the financial like implications. Mm-hmm. And I think I'm lucky CPG has a little bit deeper and more broad analytics in that we've looked at brand awareness. We've gotten into the habit of tracking brand awareness year over year or a couple times a year. And that's normal in CPG. I think in so many other categories, particularly in the DTC world, it's ceased to become normal. And everybody jumps to these analytics. And, I don't talk to me about CAC or ROAS until we've decided what we're trying to achieve, because they're not causal data, right? They're situational data that you get after the fact. If you set the wrong strategy, your CAC can be as low as possible. You're not going to get enough customers. Right. I also think that people forget to fill the funnel. I mean, it goes along hand in hand with what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. You can't get somebody to convert if they don't know you exist and why you exist. And all too often, people jump down into this like conversion metrics, whether it's through social media, or largely through paid media, I think seems to be the place that happens. And they leave this whole thing on the table where you've got to fill the funnel. I was talking to somebody recently about a beverage brand that had a loyalty program. And they had 3 tiers to the loyalty program. And the second tier, 60% of the people who entered into the second tier were coming through the first tier. And they stopped marketing the first tier. That's where you're getting the value, right? It doesn't make any sense. And it's super obvious. Like, you need to get people involved.
And there's a lot of data backing that up, that if you don't first start with brand awareness and, again, announcing who the heck you are first, and you're trying to hit people over the head from day one that know nothing about your brand, the data shows that that's just a very poor strategy.
But you must fight it all the time, right? I mean, when you're doing paid media events, how often do you get a CEO being like, oh, no, we need to spend more on low funnel because they've got some board that wants to see funnel metrics, they want to see funnel metrics. They want to see conversion metrics.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I did at Levain is we put in place an annual brand tracker, because you know what, in a few years when we go, if they go to sell that business, or, if someone looks to invest in that business, they're going to want to know that year over year, particularly a brand that's so heavily focused on a single region, New York, they're going to want to know what the value of that brand is outside of New York, and where is there room to grow, and do we have space to grow? And the only way to tell that, frankly, is through brand tracking. You can't tell that through conversion metrics. It doesn't say anything.
Yeah, I want to get your thoughts, too, on how you found to successfully track brand awareness, brand health, brand loyalty. What are some of the things? I know it's a mixed bag, and it's always difficult in a lot of different industries, but what are some of the things that you found that really allows you to say, okay, we're making some strides here. This is really, data I can present to the higher ups?
I mean, I almost exclusively look at just annual brand trackers, custom research surveys, unaided and aided brand awareness questions, really good old fashioned stuff. I had this conversation this weekend with a friend of mine who's in market research at L'Oreal. And it's the same thing. These annual trackers, because you can't track it that regularly. You can't track it on a monthly basis. That doesn't exist. Yeah. And I, to me, that type of research, while expensive, is worth it. You just have to have some patience around it, which is not something that marketing has become adept at.
Have you found any, not metric, but data in terms of how long does it take to introduce a brand to somebody and then for them to kind of become loyal, right? Like, I've always heard like the 9-month stretch is like, to build a relationship, you almost have to have like 9 months of, when it comes to like at least when it comes to like prospecting and things like that, to really have like that one-to-one relationship. But wondering because again, it's interesting how you've worked in so many different verticals, if you've seen one thing kind of travel between those.
I haven't. I wish I had. I'd probably be very wealthy if I had, but I'm not.
Well, the answer is it's different. It just depends on industry. It depends on,
right? But that's part of setting business objectives, is like, what's your repeat cycle? Yeah. And how are you defining loyalty? At an airline, if I could get somebody who repeated 3 or 4 or 5 times a year, that was great. Obviously, a business traveler, very different than a leisure traveler, and loyalty is different, even amongst the different audience there. In the pet business, I wanted those people to come back multiple times a month because, particularly people who own large dogs, you don't really want somebody who's only coming in and buying a bag of food and then going to Petco or Chewy.com or whatever it was at the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it all depends on what your purchase cycle is. And to me, that's part of setting the objectives. It's so funny. As I've talked to people about this stuff recently, it's all the same. Social media is the same. CRM is the same. It's all about getting somebody aware and moving them through a funnel to be more frequent with you. And we all try to make it all so much more complicated. And
yeah.
It's not.
Well, and I think, I'm sure you'll agree with my statement here. I think it really goes back to our society and the get quick rich scheme and just wanting their stuff immediately, that marketing takes time. I mean, marketing actually has to have a process, and you have to kind of like work that muscle every single day. And, that doesn't sound fun to people. They kind of want how do I make this happen overnight? They
do. But I think that we also, as marketers, we owe it to you. You mentioned before we got on the recording that it's all the touch points marrying together, right? And I think we get really forgetful that everything touches each other. Marketing, if you listen to Philip Kotler, there's 4 Ps. At Unilever, there were 6. And there's a million different touch points. And people forget that packaging is a piece of marketing, right? The PR is marketing. The word of mouth is marketing. Oh, by the way, word of mouth, still like 90% offline, right? Forget that there's all these touch points, and we get hung up on that paid media thing as marketing. And it's partly because we as marketers know that, but like CFOs, CEOs, sales guys, they think advertising equals marketing, and that's not fair. But I think we forget that. We forget that the signage, when I started at Kriser's, I came in and they had hired, I had applied for a director of CRM job. I became director of marketing because they weren't even ready for CRM. It was way further down their tactical plan. And I went out to the stores my first week on the job, and I came back and I said to the president of the company, we have to change the name on the stores. First week. He's like, do you want to wait till week 2 to have that opinion? And I said, no. So when I'm standing 50 feet across a parking lot or 100 feet across a parking lot in Englewood, Colorado, and I see Kriser's for your pet's all natural life written in script, I have no idea what that is. Yeah. If you said Kriser's natural pet in nice big block lettering with a logo that showed the dog and the cat in the logo better than it does today, mark my words. And I couldn't prove anything. Like at the time, I just said, mark my words, it's going to go up. We forget that that's vital.
Yep.
And we, sure enough, we changed it and saw, percentage increases in sales. And so we made those changes across the board. We opened new stores with it. It became really easy for direct mail to carry the same logo, for all of our PR and our social media to carry that same logo, and the world changed. We had the same debate when I started at Levain. Levain had gone through a rebranding just before I started. And so I was handed a brand book, and there's a logo in the brand book that was prescribed for the wayfinding signage outside of the bakeries. Meant nothing. It's a perfectly fine logo, and in a boardroom it was wonderful. But to me, it didn't really mean that much. And so I actually went and used the word mark for wayfinding, because a consumer doesn't see what we see in a brand book. A consumer sees what they see.
Yeah.
I think you have to remember those things, and every one of those touch points matters. Every one of those touch points gets you en route to where you need to get to.
How often, I would imagine, because I do this a lot in our company as well, but when you're talking to the president, I think another issue in marketing is the people that eat, live, and breathe the brand every day, specifically the CEO or founder, it's in their head. So when they see a piece of creative or they see a logo, oh my God, it works great because our logo means this, and it goes back to our core values or whatever it may be. And then you constantly have to put yourself in the shoes of the consumer that knows nothing about your brand, and they're walking and they're seeing that logo or they're seeing your website, like you mentioned. I'm sure that has a lot to do with your job, especially at the consulting level. Like, I know you know what it means, but Sally down the street that knows nothing about your brand will have no idea what that means.
Yeah, I do a lot of consensus building in my life. It's funny, the behaviors that I've gotten into, it's funny you ask it because I never really think about it. It's just part of like what we do. Like, how often are you guys, like some designer on your team have to put it in situ, right?
Right.
But that's it. You put it in situ. You show it to somebody who isn't living in, an AP clerk or a finance person who's not having this discussion regularly,
Smart.
I build that relationship. My supply chain guys were always like big partners in crime here because they care about the brand, they care about what they're doing, but they like aren't looking at it. I'd show it to family and friends and be like, so-and-so said this. I'd show it to, you know, I've been lucky to work in small companies, so we're sort of all hanging out together. And
Yep.
I think that's a part of it, is just bringing in the perspective of somebody who's never really looked at it that way. My finance people are always my best friends at my companies because they see it really cut and dried, and it forces me to take a step back because how many more people are like them than are like me or like the CEO? And I think it's always that way.
What are some simple things, this is kind of like tactical, but what are some simple things that you think all brands can do and should be doing to increase their marketing? Because I have a few thoughts on that, just especially from a social standpoint, but are there small things that just amaze you that people can easily do for free or overnight that would extremely help their brand, but you don't see them doing or executing on that?
Oh God. It changes by brand. Like I at Levain, we didn't have our logo on our packaging when I started, like the bakery packaging. And then we launched new packaging, like new tote bags for when you walked out of the bakery with your cookies. Yeah. The coolest thing was the first day I saw somebody walking down the street with that new bag.
I mean, Lululemon has done that phenomenally with their bags. Beautiful. I mean, those things are everywhere. And then every woman I know reuses that bag and carries it everywhere they go. So.
Well, and so the overarching thing I would say is consistency.
Yeah.
I think take a good hard look at your brand consistency. Don't try to apply a different piece of the brand to each channel or tactic or piece of material. I think if every brand did a little bit of an audit of their consistency, to me, that's a big win, including social media for what it's worth, right?
Yep.
Like always you want to be breakthrough and different and you want to be noteworthy, but like every week without fail, there's a cookie break on Levain's social media. And without fail, that cookie break gets the highest engagement, highest likes, highest shares. It's consistent. And so have that like drumbeat underscoring everything else you're doing, because somebody always needs to come back to like what's comfortable, I think.
Yeah, and I always tell too, like even my business owner friends that work in totally different sectors in business, it's like, I know you don't have this crazy Twitter strategy or Instagram strategy, but at the very least, secure those handles so that way when people search on Google, your name comes up for your official website. You got Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and that becomes your top 5, search results. That's something that you can do. And even if you link people like, hey, all of our updates are over on Instagram, and that's just, you pin that tweet to the top and you never tweet again, having that real estate online when people search for you is so valuable. So little things like that, like I'm sure you see it all the time where it's like, why are you not at least doing that? But
yeah, I think having your employees like what you're doing and share it with people. How often do we forget to do that? Like, I think, I was just going to tell you something and I blanked on it. I think those little things, SEM to me, or SEO, it sounds so, and it's funny because I've recently been smacked upside the head with this.
Yeah.
Like, because I have a website on, I had rebuilt Levain's website and it's fine. It's good. Right. Obviously this year, anything DTC is better than good. It's been a crazy year for sending cookies. I was recently reminded by a mentor and a consultant who came in to sort of help us. Don't forget about SEO. Find a good SEO shop to do it. This is a specialty. There are places,
absolutely,
specialists. SEO is one of those great places to go find a shop that this is all they do, that they are beyond aware of every little algorithm.
Quick warning, as I'm sure you've seen, there's a lot of bad SEO shops and black hat SEO, so you have to really take time to find the right partner too.
I mean, I went to one, this is years ago, but like even I knew that Google's algorithm had changed, and I'm not like a digital per se, and I came in and they were still appending enormous amounts of text in the footer.
Yeah.
Who does that? Yeah. They were paying thousands of dollars to do this company. No ixnay.
We had a similar situation in our company. We're working with the SEO partner, and we're telling them, like, when you're like telling them how to do their job, they should be teaching you a lot of things about if you're a true specialist. So I agree. Matt, we've been talking a lot about what we're calling the digital revolution over the last 6 months or so on this podcast. And, I think potentially fast forwarding maybe 5 to 10 years of what it was going to be just because of 2020, everything that's happened with COVID, traditional marketing kind of not being possible in the first half of the year. I would love to get your thoughts on just how you think 2020 overall so far has changed the marketing industry.
I mean, to me, it's up the game in content, right? And it's made content. And I hate these buzzwords. I'm good at revolution content. These words.
Content is king. Yeah.
Yeah, but it is, right? I mean, so for me, content, new ways of connecting with people. I think, whether it's this whole Zoom situation, right, where you're having different. It's enabling brands, people within brands, and brands as brands themselves to engage with people in a different way. It used to be much more of like a push mindset. Now there's a dialogue that I think has changed. I think the onus is on brands to be far more responsive than they ever were. For years we've talked about the fact that like to be really great in social media, you need to answer the questions that come through the comments. No. You really have to do that now.
Yeah.
And I think it's, the technology platforms are changing. I think I love what's happening with Zoom. I think Zendesk is going to get a nice kick out of everything with the amount of DTC brands popping up. I think bots are going to have to become even smarter from an AI perspective and not be so robotic and be authentic. But I think it puts the onus back on the brand to really understand what they are and to be authentic and to stretch their wings and to kind of not bullshit who they are and what they are. And I think, to me, that's part of what this is. We have a pause. We have a moment to figure out how we really fit into different people's lives. Whether it's cookies. We went through a couple months ago and did a whole look at like the consumer landscape and said, okay, what need states do we really fill? And how are we going to make sure to maximize each of our like roles in those different need states? And then you build the technology platforms or the communication platforms underneath that.
Yeah.
But if we know our e-commerce DTC is largely about gifting, well, then we're going to like make sure that we market against that we communicate against that we maximize that. As we launch into CPG, if we know that that's about having a sweet treat in your fridge, well, that's what everything is going to be.
Right.
And you can't clutter those two things because at some point it becomes the kitchen sink and a mess. And I think the digital landscape gives us an opportunity to really understand consumer behaviors in a really robust way. I mean, data gives us that.
Yes.
And I watched The Social Dilemma just this weekend.
Yeah.
And I choose to be very aware of the negativity of like social media, but also remember that also gives us an ability to be way more sensitive to consumers' needs and wants. And as marketers, that's the onus I feel like is on us at this point.
Yeah, it's funny you said that. We just had an after show about The Social Dilemma because we were all, had some hot takes afterwards. But to your point, my example was I love the Lakers and I like a lot of Laker content. So if the new Nike LeBron shoes come out, I appreciate if you push that to my feed. So there's good things about that. If you can actually, instead of getting junk mail in the traditional snail mail, like send me stuff that I actually care about, and then I'll be all ears.
My take on it is just if all it does is it raises people's awareness of what's going on out there, it will have succeeded. I didn't delete anything. I may have changed a couple locations preferences or something.
Yeah.
But to me, it's about raising awareness. I sent it to my mother, so hopefully she starts understanding.
I changed my notifications because I was just getting so many, like text are one thing and email is another, but Postmates and Yelp and YouTube and all these like just banners that were coming up constantly, to their point, trying to get you back in the app and user time. That was nice to kind of just like not use my brain energy every day on seeing some of those notifications. So that was one thing that I definitely changed.
Yeah, me too.
So speaking of DTC, so I think direct to consumer and then especially subscription ordering has really accelerated this year with everything going on, including someone like myself just using that feature on Amazon a lot more. So I don't have to like remind myself every week to log in. I just have it come to my door every week or every month. What's your take on direct to consumer and how, again, I think it's really changed a lot over the last 6 months? Yeah,
I mean, it's funny. I've been talking to buyers at grocery stores recently, and it's changed a ton for them, right? The entire CPG landscape has changed, and it's to me, I think there's two venues for direct to consumer. If I take it from a pure CPG and particularly food CPG standpoint, I think there's DTC, like owned DTC, like my website selling you a product.
Right.
There's also the sort of grocery.com realm, the Amazon Fresh or whatever they're calling it today. or Instacart or Fresh Direct here in New York, or anything. And I think it's been interesting. GoPuff popped up, Foxtrot Market in Chicago and Dallas popped up. Avo, which is like a whole program that's a white label approach for buildings in the city to be able to supply their customers or their tenants with a convenience store mechanism popped up. And I think that's what's changed dramatically. I don't think all of a sudden every consumer is going to go to every individual website and buy each individual product.
No.
To me, the aggregators are far more interesting. I think Thrive Market's phenomenal, what they've done over the last few years. They've become what Whole Foods was intending to be. I think Whole Foods is great, don't get me wrong, but Whole Foods under Amazon's a different beast than it was a year or 2 or 3 ago. And I think that there's these great opportunities for, and I think what they've created is media platforms, right? I mean, how much money do people spend on Amazon from a marketing standpoint now? There's an entire new discipline of skills there. And as a marketer, we were talking even this morning about Fresh Direct, and we're going to launch eventually on Fresh Direct with Levain frozen cookies. Well, somebody needs to be getting out ahead of how we're going to push the product through that channel sooner than, the traditional model of grocery store and CPG launches in general is you launch it on February 1, call it, and you've got 12 weeks before it's in full distribution around the country. This is Unilever terms, right?
Yeah.
Not anymore. You start marketing the minute it hits somewhere that has a DC. You market as soon as it hits Amazon. You market as soon as it hits Fresh Direct, and your whole mindset changes. And so, to me, the individual DTC, sure, that's important. There's also the delivery model in the restaurant business. I know, Jenny's Ice Cream, for instance, they saw a huge shift in their shipping model because suddenly it became even more about shipping to oneself because they were getting it, but also delivery became a thing. Grubhub and the consolidation within the delivery business has changed. So as brands, we have to look across all those channels and figure out how to weight them. Again, what the usage behavior is there and how to communicate through those platforms in a way that isn't starting to get cannibalistic either.
And I feel like too, I think Amazon gets a bad rap, obviously, because they're the big business, big brother, whatever you want to call it. But at a certain point for CPG brands, like if you weren't in Walmart or you weren't in major grocery stores, then you weren't able to get past that tier. What are your thoughts on Amazon? Because I know, some brands try to, I don't know, I feel like at this point with their SEO and what they're all about, people are using Amazon much more than they are even using Google to search for products. So is that just a place that almost every product has to at least consider to be successful?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I haven't done a ton with Amazon recently myself, to be honest. But as a user, one of the things Amazon never did well up until recently, it's interesting. Quidsy, which owned like Soap.com and the brands that Amazon acquired, and when we sort of shut down, they were discovery platforms, right? They were these beautiful marketing and merchandising platforms, which is much more traditional in DTC because you have all this communication. It's this storytelling capability. Yeah. And I think what you're seeing from brands like GoPuff and Foxtrot Market and in their regional plays, they're doing that really well. They're surfacing items that you might want. They're using their data. Amazon for a long time didn't do a great job at it. They had tons of metadata. So if you searched, it proactively gave you
You're right.
a bunch of things.
So you kind of went to Amazon knowing what you want instead of shopping.
Right? Yeah. Especially up until maybe like 5 years ago, 4 years ago. And I think more recently, partly because of advertising, whether we like it or not, it's become a better platform for discovery. You see things because things are served up to you better. And it's because brands are paying for that, right? And as marketers, yay.
Right.
As humans, I wish I had an opportunity. But
But again, in the grocery store, it used to be the same way, right? Like you got front placement on the eye level shelf instead of being on the top shelf. Yeah.
Which is why you only ever saw, Kraft and Frito-Lay with their DSD capabilities.
Yeah, exactly.
Off the shelves. I mean, it used to be you couldn't get onto certain shelves because you didn't have the same sales force. But I think it's probably really good. I think it's exactly what it is. It's a grocery store. What I miss about grocery stores, and I still go to grocery stores even in the midst of COVID, I love walking the aisles and seeing the new products. And I'm still looking for ways to discover that. Interestingly enough, Instagram has become my place to do that.
Yeah.
I get discovery on Instagram. It's cheaper for me to discover. It's cheaper for a small brand to send me discovery on Instagram than it is on Amazon. You're not giving up, X percentage in margin on top of advertising dollars. So it's become that, and word of mouth still carries and things like that.
And then how do you find that mixture with these brands, with an Amazon, Instacart, some of these different partners? But you also, I mean, you're going to make your most money if people actually go to your owned and operated platforms and your website and go there. So you want to be able to use the amazing amount of distribution and marketing from some of these, behemoths, if you will. But you also want to get people to your actual owned and operated. So is there any balance there that you found?
I mean, I haven't spent a huge amount of time on that because so Levain being, sort of most recent, our product on our own website and what we're distributing to grocery stores is different because the usage behavior is different.
And a lot of times the infrastructure alone just won't allow you to take as much orders there. Yeah.
DTC perishable is a nightmare. Nightmare.
Yeah.
You take a brand like Hello Products, the volume is just still not in DTC. Much as we would like it to be and much as the margin structure would say it is, but the volume is not. You probably... And the shipping rates and all of that stuff goes into it. So sure, you might make most on the gross margin, but by the time you put in the infrastructure and the operating, the scale is sometimes.
That's why Amazon has a warehouse in every city, it seems like now, distribution centers.
And I think that's exactly it. I think it goes back to what we said at the beginning, right? Know your audience and where they're shopping. It's not about everything cannot be a pull strategy.
Yeah, it's true.
You have to meet them where their needs are, and their needs are on Amazon. So you're going to Amazon.
Yeah.
Their needs are on Fresh Direct and you're going there. The only place that I think it's all about customer utility at the end of the day. And so if you're offering some sort of utility, that gets really interesting. If you're also offering something that's exclusive, you're offering,
it's funny you say that. Like I'm a big Nike guy and almost all my Nikes were bought at Foot Locker my entire life until recently. Now there's different apps and Nike.com maybe, but they put their shoes where they knew I was going,
Yeah, well, I mean, I still use Zappos religiously because I control through a lot of things there. I'm not looking for a single item. And how often do you have time to look for a single item here? Like I said, you don't go to here for this and here for that and here. I know
that's the thing. Yeah,
that's not how
it makes your life easier. Yeah,
there's a reason Target exists. There's a reason Walmart exists, right? And all Amazon does has taken that whole model and just moved it online.
Yep. Exactly. So I got two kind of broader questions that I want to get your thoughts on. The first one is I want to use 2020 as the example once again with politics, COVID, social injustice. I'm sure there's been a lot of conversations that you've had with your colleagues and with the brands you've worked with this year. But how do you have any, thoughts or vision on how you think brands should approach these issues with their consumers? If certain brands shouldn't touch it at all, like is it basically just a brand to brand discussion?
It's such a tough one. Brands have to do it in a way that's authentic to their brand and company and culture and values. And to me, that's not just about the customer for what it's worth. It's also about the employees and the corporate culture. I use the word corporate in air quotes, but air quotes. I went through some interesting stuff. At Levain, we're in the middle of New York. Protests broke out.
Yeah.
Obviously, the city, I remember driving through the city right after the Black Lives Matter, sort of the height of Black Lives Matter, and the amount of boarding up was insane. It felt like something like I've never seen in my lifetime. And we posted something in the days following the original sort of breakout of some of the stuff that was going on. And it was my writing. I'll fully take credit for it. It was wrong. It was too generic. It smelled inauthentic. Mm-hmm. It placated some people. It got trolled pretty hard with some people. And it disappointed our employees. And so a few days later, we went quiet because everybody went quiet for a while, right?
What's a smart thing to do, yeah.
Yeah, and we went quiet and we had lots of conversations in the company. And one of the most important ones was what is our team, our very young, very progressive team expecting of us? What is our not as young, not as progressive, leadership and board expect of us? And eventually we came out with another statement that was widely well received. And that's what we did. And then we moved on, but we didn't move on blindly. We didn't go back to quote unquote normal. We started making sure that it was part of our day-to-day life. And I think that kind of like the social dilemma. I think what's happened is the world's awareness is heightened to a lot of things. I'm a white girl from the suburbs.
Yeah.
I'm the definition of privilege. And it took me listening to other people in a way that I don't think I had as a young kid or as an adult. Like it wasn't part of my vernacular, and I had to learn. Myself and a lot of my colleagues had to learn a new vernacular, a new thought process, and a new consideration set, which wasn't part of it. And I think every brand went through that. And we're all still learning. I don't think we're all going to get it right. I don't think I got it right. I don't think I got it right years ago either. Like, I mean, I think if I had gotten it right years ago, we wouldn't be here today, right? If my generation had gotten all this right, we probably wouldn't be dealing with what we're dealing with now.
Yeah.
But I think that it became really important to listen to ourselves, listen to the people around us. You know, I remember watching a lot of our team on social media, on their personal social media, people I was connected to from our bakers and employees, and reading what they were writing. And it gave me like another input to what we could be saying, because I was hearing different takes. I wasn't just caught in my own little echo chamber, which as marketers is really easy to do, right? We get wedded to our brand books and we think that this is our messaging platforms. And it suddenly opened my eyes, and it wasn't easy. One of the things I'm most proud of is as we opened in Washington, D.C. a couple weeks ago, we actually worked with the woman who founded Bakers Against Racism to create a custom cookie in the market.
That's awesome.
And it wasn't just because she was her. I mean, she was just like a badass chick. I mean, this woman's is a James Beard award-winning pastry chef in DC, but she came with like a different mindset. And we were able to take her mindset and the very family and heritage-driven mindset that was Levain and married it together for this awesome custom cookie, which was really well received. And we did it. And, you know, there was always the conversation like, oh, people are going to think that we just did this because, you know, she's a minority or she's with Bakers Against Racism. And it doesn't matter. We're doing it because it's right.
Yeah.
And that felt really good. And I think, you know, the more we get to see those things, I you know, now that I'm not in a day-to-day operating role, I just hope that that's what they continue to do and to take that into consideration.
Well, that's what's so amazing about diversity, right? You just touched on it. Like, it's not diversity for the sake of diversity. It's the diversity of thought, diversity of opinion, diversity of people coming from different backgrounds and able to educate. And all of us can kind of learn from each other. And that's what's so amazing, I think, about a lot of progress that we are seeing. You touched on it, which was going to be my second question was, you know, I was talking to a colleague about this, and it was kind of a very interesting conversation last week. But the way I think about it is, shouldn't your brand, and you kind of mentioned it, shouldn't your brand be the employees that work for that brand and the consumers who buy that brand, and kind of a mixture of the two? And now maybe if you're Chevy, maybe the employees feel a certain type of way about a topic and your customers feel a different way. But I know it comes down to bottom lines and capitalism, and it comes down to profit and all those different things that people try to skirt around different issues or different things. But ultimately, if we're in a perfect world scenario, doesn't that really get down to what the brand should stand for? I
mean, I think so. I would argue I'm sort of newly in this thinking, although not really. It's always been part of my thinking, but you can't have a different message in-house and out-of-house. It doesn't. Further, aside from like how I believe in it, the generations that are coming up even behind me, they're not fucking allowing.
Yeah, it's true.
They're just not. There's no way you're getting away with saying social media has created a platform for anyone to say anything.
Yep.
And if it gets some life behind it, you don't get to play one tune to one audience and another tune. And so, like, yay for that, actually, because who wants to be inauthentic? And that's the perspective and clarity that I think you're talking about, that all of us, right, have learned through these unfortunate dark times, but have learned that part, which is going to carry on. I hope so. I mean, I think the brands who try to like go back to normal, what the hell is normal anymore? Yeah. I mean, we'll find out in a few months, but like, I don't know what normal means anymore. And I think that the world has shifted. You know, it shifted arguably 4 years ago when the election happened and all of a sudden, the world has shifted. And I think that I'm so curious to see what happens over the next few months as we come through this election cycle. Cause I think, I have a theory about how marketing is affected the politics of the world. And I think marketing slogans have ruined some things and had been really great on some things. I mean, we're arguably the worst marketing slogan of the last year has been defund the police, because I don't think that's what actually people want, but they use this shorthand, and it makes it easy for one side to paint the other side as radical and to destroy confidence. I think there was so much rhetoric around electing Hillary however many years ago, 4 years ago, but then the young people who are the loudest didn't necessarily come out to vote for it. And look at what we ended up with, And so, I mean, however people believe one way or the other, we have to do a better job. One of the things I've loved over the last couple of weeks and months, things like the sports leagues and entertainment, talking about voting, not talking about one side or the other.
Yeah, it's true.
I was watching the game last night, the football game, and just before the game, there was an NFL PA ad with to get out and vote. And I was like, oh, that's what we need. We need to show young, multi-ethnic people talking about voting. Yeah. That's our only hope to continue the dialogue in this country, irrespective of which side you land on. Just vote, just have a voice. Right. Social media, I think voice now actually exercise that.
Yeah, and I think I think we agree there, because I just thought about our own company, and my employees are extremely passionate about social justice and equality, and they join people in protest. So how can we as a brand not speak to that or support that? So Juneteenth is now a national, or not national, but it is a company holiday for us, right? And we made a lot of different changes internally because it was important to the team. And I think, I just think going forward, it's especially, you made a great point, this generation that's coming up, regardless of what used to be the case, and regardless if you're 50 or older, what you believe, this new generation coming up is going to be if I'm going to stand for something or push towards a goal for somebody, I need to make sure the values align there.
Yeah, I mean, the millennials started it, right? But this Gen Z is even more strongly in that camp.
Yeah.
So I think the defining feature of Gen Z is authenticity. They don't, I think the millennials wanted to look a certain way. The next generation are a certain way. Mm-hmm. And I'm fascinated
1,000%. I'm going to end on some rapid fire questions here to kick things off. So, all right, is there one book or newsletter or blog that you read frequently? Actually, let's start with the book. Has there been one book through your career that you've read that you gift to others or really helped you?
I mean, I think Good to Great, but that's probably.
Oh, I love that. That's one of my favorites too.
But it's a great one. And, The First 90 Days is another good one, trying to remind yourself to ask questions for quite a while and not get too comfortable too fast, which is hard for me. Get real comfortable real fast, but those two are pretty good.
I love it. What is your favorite marketing tool to help you do your job daily?
PowerPoint.
Hey, check out Google Slides. Google Slides is a game changer.
Yeah, I can hate Google's platform. I know.
But you can jump into it together. I'm telling you, it's same time.
I use OneDrive. You can do the same thing, but I also just like the security features. But maybe I'm crazy. To me, I learned how to write as a journalist student, in high school. Starting with the first sentence of any paragraph matters most, then you build the story from there. And that's how I make PowerPoint slides, and it's still how I think every day. And to me, that's been gold.
I graduated in journalism as well, so we have that in common. Any, I guess, overarching advice for upcoming marketers that want to get to that CMO level one day? What have you found?
Oh, gosh. I don't know. My world's been so circuitous. I've actually been talking about, I want to go into teaching soon, and I've
nice.
Some classes. I think it's always grounding it back in that idea of knowing your audience, knowing what you want them to achieve or to do for you and or what role that plays, and being really curious about business, not just about content or advertising. Yeah. I mean, I was a marketing and ops major in business school. I was actually communications as an undergrad. I wish I knew what a P&L looked like when I was young.
Yeah.
Until you're running a business or, a brand manager at Unilever, you don't see it.
Yep.
And knowing what profitability means, knowing what the difference between gross margin and operating margin, knowing when people talk about it above the line or below the line, knowing that stuff just makes you so much more valuable. So don't just get trapped into what you think of marketing as is particularly in this world of social media. Be curious about business in general.
I like that. All right. Finally, to end it on of course, a bunch of positivity on this note. What are you excited about for the future? And like I said, the perspective and clarity has happened this year more than ever. But as we move forward in marketing and with brand building and all these different things, like what pumps you up and gets you up every morning?
There's two things. One is I think out of every dark place, really awesome things come, right? After the 2008 downtrodden world, we had Instagram, we had Uber,
Right.
we had things that have changed our lives. So to me, I'm just like holding on, waiting for the next spate of these things.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is this return to authenticity and to walk away from like the showmanship of a lot of my childhood and my early years in marketing, and to get back to like really what matters to people. To me, that's the most fun thing. And deciding, I don't fundamentally believe that if you build it, they come. So I want people to like build something that people want.
Yeah.
And so it's not, we're not building a field and everybody's going to show up. Like,
Yeah.
create things that answer problems. And I think right now there's so many problems that people can identify. The fun's going to be in solving those problems. And I'm excited to see who this next generation of people are, who the marketers are that help communicate that. I think the role of CMO has changed dramatically.
Oh yeah.
To me, that's really exciting. I heard, Marissa Thalberg, who's now at Lowe's, she was at Taco Bell. She's brilliant.
Yeah.
I heard her speak last year at the Forbes Summit, and she was talking about like CMO is like kind of a BS title now. It's CGO and CBO and all these things. And
Chief technology officer too, I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was running tech platforms at Levain, cookie technology, but like to me, that's the most fun thing out there. And that we as marketers get to help drive that forward. And as the voice of the consumer, we are the voice of authenticity in that room. Mm-hmm. And that to me is the most exciting thing. And so as I embark and leave like a full-time job and start thinking about consulting, I can't wait to be able to like talk to different people about those things.
Yeah.
And sort of help cheerlead them on that route. That's what I'm most excited about.
It's awesome.
What are you excited
Me too.
about?
We share those. What'd you say?
What are you excited about?
Oh, what are we excited about? So I have like Siri going on. I'm excited about not having. Sorry. So what am I excited about? I think the same thing. I think what you mentioned at the top of this show is that I think a lot of people make the mistake that each vertical needs this like brand new vision and brand new strategy in order to be successful. And like you said, marketing really comes to that who, how, what, and what's our ultimate goal and who's our consumer and how are we going to provide value to the consumer so that they have like a great relationship with the brand. And then that way, when we actually want them to take action, that there's going to be some loyalty built there. So, but yeah, I'm really excited about the perspective and clarity that this whole year has really brought as well. Because I think people, at the end of the day, even if they're doing it like you said, just for capitalist reasons, they're going to start acting in a much healthier and better way for the end good. Is my hope anyway. So,
me too.
Well, Rachel, thank you so much. I'm so glad we got connected. Thank you so much for dropping that knowledge on the listeners. I appreciate it so much, and I'm looking forward to talk soon.
Thanks so much. It was great.
All right. Thanks, Rachel.
Take care.
Bye. All right. Well, there was Rachel Porges, again, CMO and advisor, and has worked for so many brands. And that was a great conversation. I learned a lot, especially about really tracking brand equity and brand awareness over time, which is something that we're doing more and more of as well here at Esteem with the different brands we work with. But yeah, found a lot of value. And again, it seems so simplistic in nature, and so many brilliant minds that have came on this show have said, who's your consumer? What's valuable to said consumer? And how do I reach this consumer? And it seems simplistic in nature, and it really is. Marketing really is that simplistic, but you got to roll your sleeves up. You got to, work that muscle every single day if you really want to cater towards your audience and reap those benefits of that work. And I think that's what marketers that we've realized tend to get wrong, even though the core values of marketing is pretty simplistic.
Yeah, I like how she lined it up where you have a brand new company where you can kind of do anything you want. You need to have a set playbook, but coming into a more established brand, they already have somewhat of an audience and somewhat of a reputation. Yep. What's your playbook there, and how does that differ? And I thought that was a really interesting breakdown by her.
Yeah, and I think ultimately what she said too is, at the end of the day, your position as a marketer is to make money. I mean, once you put it that way, you sort of think a little bit differently. Like, all right, I did this really cool campaign, or we put up this really cool booth at this conference, but did it make money? And if you start to track those things by the metrics, yes, email newsletters and brand loyalty programs and influencer marketing, all that stuff is amazing. And that builds your awareness and builds your customer base and prospects. But ultimately, is it paying off long term? Again, marketing tends to take longer than cold, hard call to action sales, as we know, Will. But you got to track that stuff and make sure it's working. Therefore, that's what you're there for, is to work directly with the revenue generation of the company.
Yeah, I forget the company she mentioned too, but they were going to bring in, it was PR. They were going to bring in a bunch of PR. It's like, no, you need to get your website right, your logo right.
Yeah.
All those cornerstones before you want all the eyeballs on your product.
1,000% agree. All right, and then, those of you that have hung on this far and you're listening to the outro, first of all, thank you. Second of all, not a lot of people do that we've realized. So I want to go back to a cliffhanger that we left on the Way program, the Way panel, where we said to the listeners, and specifically to the SC Digital employees, we said, listen, who's listening to the full program? Who is supporting the blood, sweat, and tears of Will Kelly and David Brickley each and every week on the Business Social Podcast internally here at SC Digital? So we said, listen, if you're listening right now and you're an employee, all you gotta do is email me, Furker, and Will, the term Purple Goat. And I just want to take this time for extreme shout out to your girl, someone that you're friends with and have known for quite some time. Gotta give a shout out to Nikki. Nikki, the one and only soldier out there fighting the lines of the Business of Social Podcast. I mean, Nikki emails us Purple Goat, and I'm still waiting. Maybe an employee will discover the End of the Way podcast a little bit later, but we'll see.
That's I didn't think about that. Nobody else knows that Nikki won. So
exactly. The podcast is still up there. And it's funny because we've had some of our colleagues say like, hey, I listened to the podcast, is really great. But, unfortunately they shut it off when David and Will started to tar the jib jab. So
I've received many a slack of like, hey, good episode, like the last episode, whatever. And I'm like, yeah.
You got to listen through it. It pays to play here at STN Digital all the way through, of course. You got to sprint through. What's NBA TNT? Sprint through the rope or sprint through the tape. There you go. Kenny the Jet Smith.
Congrats to Nikki on a well-earned Purple Goat prize.
Yeah, there was a prize given as well. So we appreciate, of course, all the listeners that listen to this, our clients, our friends, our colleagues, of course, all the SN Digital employees. We appreciate it. We always ask if you don't mind giving that 5-star review on iTunes so more people can see about this absolutely free program. Great knowledge, hopefully, that we drop on you each and every show. I want to thank Will Kelly. I want to thank the great David Furker for all they do to put on this program as well. And that's it. This has been another edition of the Business Social Podcast. My name is David Brickley. It's been powered by STN Digital.